Okay, today we interview Jackie and James, and they'll be talking to us about human trafficking, what kind of people get involved in it, and what's your experience working with these individuals, these victims caught into the human trafficking situation. Yeah.
So lots of people actually think that survivors of human trafficking actually come from outside the country, and this is an issue that is related to smuggling and refugees and newcomers to Canada. But in fact, a significant portion of the human trafficking population is actually domestic survivors, and this is actually very well known. They're quite often vulnerable young people who are actually easy to prey upon. Sometimes they come from difficult home lives, wouldn't you say? Not always the case, though, and the reason for this is a very effective and common style of bringing somebody into the human trafficking world is actually called a Romeo grooming strategy, in which a predator or a trafficker, or in some cases a pimp, will actually target a vulnerable young person, particularly a female, and get her to fall in love with him. So it's quite similar to the grooming behavior that is used by child predators. So there's lots of warm behavior, there's lots of gift giving, there's lots of kindness, there's lots of declarations of love. And slowly but surely, the trafficker actually draws the victim into a web of deceit and control that it is very, very hard to leave. And then the next step in the grooming process is the trafficker will say to the victim, somebody's going to hurt me, we need some money, I need your help, all I need you to do is, do a date with a friend of mine, or take your clothes off, nobody's going to touch you, you just have to dance, it's no big deal, you'll make a lot of money, and nobody's going to hurt me. And quite often, because the victim is in love with her offender, she will actually comply and do this, and that is one of the easiest ways to draw somebody into the human trafficking world and have them never escape.
Yeah, exactly. In fact, I've got, in fact, we're working on one case right now of a young lady who was brought from Ontario to BC, and what had happened with her is she was being prostituted, and she had actually called us twice. She had actually called into the crisis line twice, and they were telling her that, look, the police are looking for you. They're doing everything that they can, and can you please give us some help? And she was worried that because she had, taken part in some drug activity, that she would be charged. And the two volunteers that worked with her, they said, no, that's not going to happen. And but for some reason, she decided not to call us back. And I had gotten in touch with an agency in Vancouver called Deborah's Gate, and after I told them the scenario, they contacted the RCMP on Vancouver Island, and they were looking for her. And I got an email back saying that if this lady calls us back again, here are the questions to ask, because we're trying to find her. And so that thing is still, the situation is still pending. I mean, we've been, I think it was back in October, if I recall correctly, and we're still trying to find out what's happened. And I've called Deborah's Gate a number of times, the outreach workers there, and they haven't heard word one from this young lady.
And this is not uncommon, because if the grooming process is successful, even though the victim will in some moment have a bad situation, a bad event happen, decide she just needs to escape, she can't get away, typically what will happen is the trafficker will assume psychological control over the victim, reassure her that things are going to get better, it's not as bad as you imagine it will be, you can't escape me anyway. So there's a lot of dynamics that are actually very similar to an abusive spousal situation. And so quite often, even though help is available, the victim will not reach out for help.
Yeah.
So there are some people who say that human trafficking is something that occurs between the ears, not between the legs, right? So the control is a psychological control, not a physical one. Is the USA's National Human Trafficking Organization. They don't do mental health counseling, they only do case management and exit and police. And so they refer directly to our line for people who actually are in mental health distress. Which is
So I've only got 5 business cards. I've got them with my name on the back, but but it also includes the operational stress injury line as well, the operational stress injury link, and that's for first responders. And oftentimes the first responders, hopefully they're going to be getting help from their own group, from their own police service, or from their own fire service or EMT service. But sometimes not. So,
Do you want to pass
yeah, I
this
just want to pass those back.
one? Hand them over.
I'm just thinking that as a woman in crisis, I'm not sure I'm going to have the wherewithal to get my phone out and go Google human trafficking phone line.
Yeah.
If you're in somebody in Canada and lots of places in North America who is connected with a support agency of any kind, usually we are the only mental health counseling service for this population in North America that we
So
know
it's
of.
interagency.
Yeah, they will
Yeah.
refer their people. We get agency referrals all the time, but actually a lot of people actually find us on the web.
Yeah, yeah.
Right. What do you do when you're home in the middle of the night? It's 4 o'clock in the morning because that's your work day. You don't have anybody there, and you're scrolling.
Right.
Right. Our name pops up.
Cool, thank
So,
you.
yeah, and the thing is, oftentimes, like I'll get a call directly from the National Human Trafficking Resource Center in Washington, and they'll be saying, I've got so-and-so on the line, can you take the call? Well, sure. And I mean, like sometimes this call can really be quite intense. The person's really in a very, very bad situation. And so, it's just a matter of talking to that person and saying, look, what kind of things are going on for you that could be of help. Who can you reach out to, right in your community, and that sort of thing. It's it's very important that they have some kind of resources in the community. And in fact, like I've had a number of people who've been trafficked who've called me and were, I guess, desperately suicidal, and I really, those are the calls that I really have to work, and because I've been doing suicide prevention for, God, over 40 years. That's scary. But and the thing is, like, I mean, over time, even with 40 years experience, I'm still learning. I'm still learning to make sure that, that the area of safety is of absolute importance. And in fact, I had one call from a volunteer. This was after I had worked with a young lady who had been trafficked and was desperately suicidal, and she said, I don't know what you did for her, but she said you did something really good. And I thought, well, yeah, okay. It's just a matter that that when somebody's life is on the line, I literally will get tunnel vision. When I
40 years of experience in your heart.
Yeah. So
So what's the percentage of men or women that phone in?
Well, the men are, like I say, that it's mostly women.
At least 90%.
Yeah, at least 90. Yeah, 99.
Young women or older women?
Actually, that can be really, like, I mean, I've had callers who were in their 40s. I've had callers who were in their 20s. I've had callers who were in their teens. And and
It's
in
across
fact,
the board.
yeah, exactly. I mean, to say, and in fact, I I had a mother of a young lady who had been trafficked, and well, she had gotten involved in pornography, and you know, she was just literally at her wit's end, and you know, I'd often talk to her for sometimes an hour, you know, maybe even an hour and a half, you know, and
Quite commonly.
yeah, and so you know, I mean, you know, like I've gotten to the point now where when a call comes in, you know, and it looks like it's going to be a long call, I say, can I call you back? Because I've got free calling on my phone, in free North American calling. So I say, can I call you back? And very, very often, you know, more often than not, they're saying, yes, you can. So I call them back, save Chrysalis some money, make sure that, you know, that the person's looked after. And I mean, some days, some days I'm just glad when my shift is over. I've had a couple of, people who were, you know, like I guess the new term is non-binary rather than transgender. So and I've had those calls, and you know, still the same dynamic, but the thing is, like, there are just some different nuances that are, you know, that are there, and so, you know, it's, yeah.
So it's the same violent criminal activity, but the resources that you would direct that person to might be different depending on what community.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. You know, in fact, I've got one agency in Toronto called Bridge North, and the lady there, her name is Cassandra Diamond, and she's a former prostitute, and I mean, she is, you know, and in fact, I have actually referred people over to her, and you know, she said, you know, she's told me, look, if if you're calling and you want to know where, you know, how this person's doing, please don't ask, because you know, once I start working with them, nobody knows, you know. So it's just a matter of safety, you know. So, you know. But
More
I mean,
during your speech.
yeah.
Yes.
So, but
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. You're welcome.
A little bit about James Venneear. James grew up in Ontario, but we can't hold that against him.
Thank you. Thank you.
He graduated from the University of Windsor first with a Bachelor of Arts in Psychology, followed by a Bachelor of Social Work with honors. In Edmonton, James served First Nations as a social development analyst with Indian Affairs Canada. He ensured elders and persons with disabilities received assistance through the Adult in-Home Care program. James then served as an area counselor for Veterans Affairs Canada. In home and office visits, he led and assisted veterans to programs they needed. He assessed many disability pensioners to discover if they qualified for financial assistance. James worked as a clerk for Veteran Affairs Canada for 8 years, responding to needs and formal requirements of clients. He also directed them to client service agents or counselors. For 2 years employed with on-site placement, James Venneear presented diverse topics and discussed ways with clients to assist them or refer them forward to meet their employment needs. Since 2015, he is the volunteer coordinator of Chrysalis Anti-Human Trafficking Network. He recruits volunteers for crisis line work for trafficked people, and also those who serve first responders with operational stress or the beginnings of post-traumatic stress. Let's give James Venneear. Actually, we had James Venneear tell us what it's really like to assist or guide human trafficking victims at Chrysalis Network. But let's put our hands together for James Venneear for all the work that he does. If you have a few more words, that would be great.
I guess. Well,
So people can see it.
I'll move the chair over. Oh, there's a camera on the floor here. Do you want to
yeah,
grab that?
you don't want to step on that. Anyway, excuse me, a lot of the clients that we serve, and in fact, the one that, that I discussed earlier, it's not uncommon where, where people are lured into being trafficked. And in fact, I talked briefly about a mother whose daughter had been lured into pornography, and she was quite upset because she do searches because she wasn't. She'd lost contact with her daughter, and the only way to find out what her daughter was doing was to do a web search on her daughter, and all this did was just make her even more upset, so. Over time, in fact, with myself and another volunteer, we've probably talked to this mother for over a year, and she's still struggling. She's still having very, very difficult time, and. But also, I wanted to tell you about one other situation that I had. This is a lady, young lady, 17 years old, when she called us. She had been sexually abused from a very young age, and she says that she told me that she didn't even have the verbal skills. So that was pretty bloody young to start off. And so her father, the nice guy that he was, he sold her to a pimp at the age of 5. And from the age of 5 until the age of 17, when she called us, she was working as a prostitute. Now, the unbelievable thing that I found was that she had maintained an 88% average all through high school. She had 5 Canadian universities offering her either an academic scholarship or an athletic scholarship. So I had referred her over to an agency in Toronto where she was living, and with this agency, the executive director, once that person is in her care. Once that person is in her care, she will literally disappear. If I call and ask her, how's so-and-so doing? It's a brick wall. And that's okay. As long as I know that, as long as I know we referred her over to the right agency, that's fine. So, any questions?
question.
Yes.
How do you maintain your own mental health when you're dealing with this on a regular basis?
Actually, in fact, I've got a good friend, a good friend I went through university with, and like he's doing private practice in Windsor, and we often talk to one another, and he's really quite helpful, and I also know that I have this lady here who I can call on and cry on and cry on her shoulder if I ever need to. So yeah. Any other questions? Jeez, I thought I was going to have to answer all of them.
Maybe later.
You're welcome.